Thanks for joining me, Lindsay, today. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
And you have some exciting news. You have a couple businesses that you've started over the last couple of years, and I would just love to hear about them.
yeah. So I have two businesses. The first is specialized permitting, which is specifically to help homeowners navigate the short-term rental permitting process in Sonoma County in all of the jurisdictions that operate. So it's great for those homeowners who are purchasing but want to rent themselves. And so they don't want to necessarily get a property manager involved at that stage, just need help working through the permitting process. And so then I'm a great resource for them there. My other company, Beau Maison, we do full service property management for short-term, mid-term, and second homes. So we'll do everything as far as listing the properties online, doing the noise monitoring, installing digital locks, and then all of the communication with guests prior to arrival and then once they're in house.
Oh, fantastic. That takes a lot off of the plate of the homeowner for sure.
Yes.
And what kind of people do you see that are jumping into the short-term rental market?
It's really honestly a wide variety. Over the last several years, of course, we've seen a lot of new purchases, mainly coming from buyers potentially in San Francisco, but we've also seen a lot of homeowners that have owned their properties for a while and just aren't getting up to the area as much as they used to. And so they're looking to short-term rent to help supplement that income because they want to keep the house. That's the home for their retirement, most likely. And so they want to get a short-term rental permit just to bring in some income to help them, but still have the home available for when they are ready to come up to wine country and visit.
Nice. And what kind of benefits do you see for short-term rentals over, let's say, a long-term rental or putting somebody in there full-time?
I mean, obviously, the biggest benefit that we have seen over the last 5 years, and this is a really real benefit to our community, is housing those who lost their homes in recent wildfires. And so many short-term rentals, because they're already furnished, they can really easily transfer to a rental for those people where we had one rental where there was fire damage to their home. And so they rented a home in Windsor for 6 months while their property was being fixed from that fire damage. And so, but beyond that, people who actually lost homes ended up renting short-term rentals for 2 years while they were rebuilding their properties. So it's a really nice kind of option to have, when you're in such a dire situation, to be able to say, okay, I can go somewhere that's furnished, that has a kitchen, that is a home for me and my family while I figure out the next step. Beyond that, of course, there's always transient occupancy tax revenue, which out of all taxes goes dollar for dollar to the actual jurisdiction that it's collected in. So sales tax, property tax, those don't go directly to the city. It's split to the state a little bit and, the county and wherever. But transient occupancy tax, if it's collected in Santa Rosa, stays in Santa Rosa. If it's collected in Windsor, stays in Windsor. So that's a really nice benefit to those towns and cities.
Oh, fantastic. And then do you also see, have you spoken with the hospitality industry or the tourism boards to see if there's actually an uptick since we have had more family-friendly spaces for people to stay aside from just hotels?
I mean, I think there's definitely a real benefit, especially considering we are such a hospitality-based community and county. I used to work in the events industry, so you'd see firsthand where there's a lot of families traveling up for weddings and events. And so it's easier to stay in a home than it is in a hotel. It's just, I have 4 kids myself. It's very convenient to have a kitchen there. And then generally the cost is lower per bedroom versus a hotel. So it just makes it a more affordable option for most families as well.
Absolutely. And speaking with some of the owners of wineries and tasting rooms in Healdsburg, the main feedback that I've gathered from them is that their businesses really suffered when Healdsburg stopped allowing short-term rentals in the area.
Right, absolutely. I mean, yeah, between tasting rooms, restaurants, that they all see a benefit to those guests coming to the county. And so it's definitely hurts our economy overall when we don't have those travelers.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And then I also think about the people that come to clean and the handymen that, come to repair things, or just the plumbers that come to, snake drains, like everybody who works or is in any way affiliated with, contracting or homes or anything along those lines. They really do benefit from having the short-term rentals in place as well. So it really benefits small mom and pop businesses as opposed to, going to a large hotel where it's very corporate and a lot of that money isn't staying and being used locally.
Absolutely. I mean, I used to work in hotels as well. And so I can absolutely tell you that the cleaners of homes are making more dollars per hour than they are working in a hotel. And so, one, it creates a better quality of life, but you're also creating, as you mentioned, more small businesses, more entrepreneurs. Those people can have a better quality of life, but also the flexibility of owning their own business and not necessarily working for a corporation. And so that just changes to how they spend their dollars and their disposable income that they can have.
Yeah. Yeah. So earlier this week, or last week, there was a meeting with the Windsor City Council, and there was an article that had come out that said that, Windsor was a pretty easy place to have a short-term rental, and the residents, a few very vocal residents came and pushed back on those ideas, and they had a really nice, clean ordinance that was ready to be passed. And then some of the locals came back and had a little bit of pushback. What were some of the concerns that the locals had about a short-term rental?
Yeah, and I mean, this is something that you see really in any jurisdiction. It's just been different in Windsor because there were no rules in place. And so, whenever you have a situation where you don't have any rules and people are allowed to operate, there's always going to be you know, some issues that arise that you might not have anticipated. So a lot of the comments that they had were noise, which absolutely the new ordinance had quiet hours that needed to be listed and adhered to. That was really, noise was really the main thing. There were some concerns about traffic and, people coming in and out of neighborhoods once a week, or multiple times a week, depending on how often the house is booked. But again, most ordinances have parking restrictions, and so you're only allowed to have a certain number of cars that need to be parked in a driveway, maybe one on street. So that changes things a lot. Sometimes it's trash cans that are left out too long. Those generally are part of ordinances as well. So those were some of the main things. Some other concerns they brought up were people not knowing who's coming into their neighborhood. So, there were some scare tactics involved where, one community member brought up, well, what if it's gang members that come into my neighborhood? And I can tell you that homeowners that are renting their house short term are much more likely to vet the guests that are coming into their property than a hotel is. They do basically no vetting, where when someone is renting their property short term, that's a major asset for them. They care about it. They most of the time care about their community as well. So they don't want the community to be disturbed. It sounds like there were a few very specific properties that came up, and several locals spoke about those same properties, maybe two or three, several different times. Well, if there's 108 permits or business licenses that have been issued for Windsor, that obviously is not the majority of homes that are causing the issues, which is also typical, where you see a few people that aren't operating in good faith for their neighbors in the neighborhood, and you need to address that. And so that's what an ordinance would typically do, or you might have standards that the property manager has to follow. Otherwise, they're not allowed to operate and manage homes in that jurisdiction. That's something like the county is about to adopt as well. So there are all sorts of avenues that they could take that would still move this in a positive direction for local businesses, the community in general, but still satisfy those neighbors that are having some issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of it too is that if there is a short-term rental next door and you don't necessarily know the owner or who is managing the property directly, I can see that there would be a frustration there. I know that it's super important to know your neighbors, no matter where you are and no matter which home you live in. And so I think that that is also a really important part. In addition, if somebody does have a complaint, there's really no one for them to call or no way for them to express that complaint.
Right.
So, I mean, servants.
They did talk about hiring a monitoring service, which I think is great. You know, oftentimes when there is a noise complaint, it's going to come in at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night when, you know, the town offices aren't open. And so to have a 24-hour service that then has the property manager on file and can reach out to them, the county adopted that recently, and that's been very successful so far. So that was something that the town of Windsor had brought up as well, which I think is a great option. I mean, notifying the neighbors too of who the property manager is, you generally have to send a letter in most jurisdictions. So that would solve that issue of they very clearly know who to call if something arises. So I think, you know, there are so many tools that weren't even able to be adopted that could have helped this process go a lot smoother well before where we are now.
Right. And I mean, what's your take on being able to bring it back from the brink of extinction? Like who are people that we need to call?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the town council doesn't work in silos. So they are, you know, they all have to vote. I'm not sure exactly the number that they need to pass this, but certainly Vice Mayor Sam Salmon was the most vocal about banning short-term rentals in residential districts. Obviously, the issue with that is leaving only commercial districts for short-term rental. Those commercial districts are very limited in Windsor in general, unless they extend into the mixed use area around the town green and things like that. So there's just not, you won't be replacing one for one by taking short-term rentals out of residential districts and putting them into commercial. It's just not going to benefit the town in the same way with visitors, transient occupancy tax, having a resource for locals if they do need a home in an emergency. So that's probably the thing that I would push the most. But so the other, you know, anyone on the town council, they need to understand sort of who's doing it well and what is in place in those jurisdictions that could change how this might work for Windsor. Now, so I would say reaching out to any of them is great and trying to get, you know, give your 2 cents and get in front of them with your opinion. And then Deborah Fudge sort of seemed like the most like, I'm willing to let this go through, but here's what I need to make sure is going to happen. And then all the rest sort of fell somewhere in the middle. So, you know, they definitely need to be hearing from the other side of the coin of those businesses that are going to be losing revenue, of, you know, really looking at the transient occupancy tax numbers of what that will mean for the town of Windsor to have that influx of cash as well. So it, you know, because it can, if it's really operating at 108 short-term rental permits, I mean, they're almost looking at $1 million of transient occupancy tax revenue per year.
Yeah, that's a big number,
right?
For sure. So what else can you tell me? How did you jump into the short-term rental permitting market, and what's your favorite part of your job?
Yeah, I mean, I used to do sales for a nationally known short-term rental manager and decided that was maybe not the best fit for me anymore. I wanted to get a little more smaller and local. And so part of my job there was to handle the permitting for short-term rentals. And that also brought in the advocacy piece, which I think advocacy is so important, especially as a property manager. You know, you're partly protecting your livelihood as well as making sure that things are run properly and that, you know, in your local community is still being protected. So that was really a big part of my previous position that I've carried forward. And so I think that's the thing I get most passionate about, is the advocacy piece, because, I think private property rights are very important, but I think it's also striking a good balance. I used to work in hotels, so I've been on that side of hospitality, and then I've now work in short-term rentals. And so I've seen both sides, and the clientele isn't the same. And so you're bringing different clientele to the marketplace that you might not see if you only had hotels.
How many properties do you manage currently in Sonoma County or Marin County, or where's your territory?
Yeah, so we're
properties?
based in Sonoma County, and so we're just in the brink of getting started. We started earlier this year, so we're ramping up quickly. So right now we have two, one in Santa Rosa, one in Healdsburg, but in the unincorporated area of Healdsburg, and then looking at adding properties all the time. So we basically operate, the only area we don't really operate in currently or aren't targeting is the Russian River, because they have a really great set of local property managers there that I think do a good job. But otherwise, yeah, anywhere from Healdsburg to Vega Bay over to Sonoma. So we're looking at doing all of that.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. Well, can you give me a little bit more about what you offer as a property manager that other companies might not?
Yeah, so really the biggest thing is, because I was with a nationally recognized short-term rental manager previously, I took sort of the best parts of that when creating my current business. And so we utilize digital locks, noise monitoring, tablets in the home. So that's a source of, it's a great access for guests to know what's around them so they can find those local businesses. With the noise monitoring, it also will tell you if there's too many guests in the home, so you can set that to certain levels. The noise monitors will automatically alert the guests if they've been exceeded the decibel level for too long. And so then same thing like professional photography, we list on multiple platforms. We'll be listing on our own website as well, which just drives additional traffic, but also you're not paying for Airbnb and VRBO because they charge the guest a listing fee and the owner. So if you can, drive traffic direct to your website, that's better for the homeowners, but we do all of that.
Oh, nice. Nice. And then do you have somebody on call or online that comes in and checks the home after it's been cleaned or while it's being cleaned, or do you have check-in, check-out help?
Yes. So I have my partner who's our operations person, and he oversees the cleaners. We do utilize local businesses. So we utilize local cleaning services, local handyman, local plumbers. So every time the cleaner comes through, they do have a checklist that they have to go through. And then our homeowners can see photos of the home once it's been cleaned. We do the same thing when we do inspections. So we do inspections after each guest just to make sure that everything is as it should be. And then we do digital locks for check-in, but then also encourage homeowners to add ring doorbells so that they can also see, and we can have access to those of who's coming in and out.
Oh, perfect. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And I'll make sure that we, reach out to our fellow city council members in Windsor and spread the word about what's happening there.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much.
All right. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
Thanks.
Bye.